Hello pianists and colleagues and friends. Today we're talking about how to teach Debussy's Prelude, which is subtitled The Girl with the Flaxen Hair. It of course sounds like this. This is a very familiar piece and one that is popular among students because it is one of the easiest things that Debussy wrote. And the truth of the matter is that Debussy didn't write anything that's very easy. If you have questions about difficulty level for pieces, particularly when working with your students, not wanting to give them something that's too hard for them to really be able to play, would you check out the link in the description of this video to my free downloadable repertoire difficulty worksheet. As I said, it's free and it will help you determine the difficulty of any individual piece very quickly. Today I'm looking at this in the Schirmer Performance Edition done by Christopher Harding. The particular book I have in front of me is the 16 Piano Favorites, but this piece also is in one other book that he has called 7 Piano Favorites. I will be sure to link those in the description of this video, as well as the Henley text in case you're looking for an text, which Henley text is great for Debussy. If you are working with a student who is new to Debussy, I might recommend a student edition such as the Schirmer Performance Edition, or the Hinson Anthology of Impressionistic Music is another one. I am currently teaching this piece out of that book with one of my students. I think I am just partial to the Harding edition. I've used it multiple times. It's clean. I like his fingering choices, and so that's the one that I keep gravitating towards. Do note that the Alfred edition is the only one of these that I have mentioned that does include pedal markings, and I promise I'm going to talk about pedal later on in this video. All right, what do our students need to know in order to be able to learn this piece and play it well? The first thing seems very obvious, but it's actually a big stumbling block for students, and that is that this is in the key of G flat major. In G flat major, every note is flat except F, and so the real stumbling block is C flats. And because we're in G flat, you know, the subdominant or the 4 chord is C flat major. And we get quite a few C flat major triads throughout this piece. And it is just a thing that students have to get over, that C flat looks like B on the keyboard. C flat is a white key, it's not a black key. In addition to that, Debussy uses just a couple of F flats. There's one very notable one at the downbeat of measure 15 in the left hand. I'm going to talk about those fourths later on. So again, just understanding that F flat is a white key also, and F normally appears throughout this piece also, of course, as a white key. So let's talk a little bit about those chords. Harmonically, this is not all that bizarre. It is definitely mature Debussy, and we can hear that in some of the characteristics, such as quite a bit of use of pentatonic scale movement. There's also these parallel fourths, which again I'm going to talk about. That movement is very mature, Debussy sounding. There's a lot of that maturity in the style of composition that we hear, but harmonically it's relatively safe. So understanding right at the end of measure 2, the first chord that shows up, C flat major, going to G flat major, 4, 1. And then in measure 5, D flat, B flat minor, E flat minor, G flat major, D flat, the very interesting B flat major, which takes us to, that's the dominant of E flat major. So there's nothing fancy about those chords in and of their own right. They're just triads, major and minor. There's no sevenths included. And I think it's important for students at this level to be able to identify what those are. It's also going to help them play accurately if they know, well, that's just supposed to sound like a D flat major triad. Similarly, but I think even more importantly, is at the end of measure 21, we get this big C flat major chord, 4 notes in each hand, and then that goes to D flat again, E flat major, going to A flat major. No C flat that time. And then that's repeated. It's a beautiful chord progression, very interesting, a little bit modal sounding, but again, it's just triads. So that can help your student in the learning process and make sure they can play accurately. Please do note, of course, as I just said, there are multiple 4-note chords in this. For students with small hands, some of those may be difficult to reach. This is a piece I wouldn't assign if my student can't reach those 4-note chords, because it is just part of how this works. So just check that. If you do have a student with a smaller hand who wants to play this, you could certainly, if they really, really want to play it, you could certainly reduce a little bit and help them with that. But in general, they need to be able to do that. As far as 7th chords, Debussy loves 7th chords, and we do have those too. If you look at measure 8 and 9, we have that G flat 7, so these dominant 7th sounding chords. Nice one. Again, just taking us back to G flat major. As far as the chords go that are split too wide for your hands to be able to literally play with 2 hands, we only have 2 hands as pianists, there are places where Debussy does not expect you to literally reach all of the notes. One example of that is at the end of bar 6, you have the 5th and the 3rd all written in the bass clef, and the right hand has an octave, so you can't take anything with the right hand either. And with all of these, like measure 28, the C flat hangs on and then the left hand comes up here. It's intended for you to use the pedal to continue those sounds and for the pedal to help you with the grace notes, such as measure 16. That has to come in right before the beat and catch the pedal and go up. And sometimes students just look at it on the page and think, how in the world am I supposed to play this? So assure them in the very first lesson, you can't physically reach that. We're going to figure out a way to roll it. If you listen to multiple recordings, different people roll these different ways. And so I am a big advocate for trying different things. Experiment with your student. Listen to different recordings. See what works well and what you like the sound of and what you can play beautifully with beautiful sound at the appropriate dynamic, which is often piano or pianissimo in this piece, and decide what you like. Generally, there's usually a couple of options. Either roll the left hand before or play it as 2 blocked, that kind of thing. But again, I would advocate for trying lots of things and deciding on what you think sounds best. Let's talk about the fourths, the parallel fourths. We have 2 little bits of this. Measure 14 is one of them, and then 33 and 34 is the other one. And the part that's really unfortunate about this is the downbeat of the second measure is different both times. So if I take just the left hand at measure 14, that time is F flat. But if I do the comparable passage at 33, and then keeps going, and that's a major stumbling block for students. The reason is that our brains like things that are totally different or exactly the same, and our brains do not process well things that are very similar. And so the idea of creating that neural pathway for the physical movement that the first time goes to F flat and the second time goes to F natural is quite difficult. So very first lesson, I'm going to make sure I address that left hand part, and then we're going to talk about how to go past that with these 2 sections and practice. The right hand has 2 different things going on. The bottom note goes with that left hand harmony. So I'm going to have my students take off the soprano, the top part, and practice. That's 14, 15, and then going over to 33. And then once they've done that, I would ask them to do the soprano by itself to really hear this melodic content on top. And the other one is slightly different. And then once they've done that, we can mix and match. We can do just the 2 right hand parts. Or we can do the soprano with the left hand fourths. I almost messed up the F flat that time. And then we can put it all together and hear how the 3 harmony lines are supporting that melody line on top. And then it's very important, this is the most important part of this, to have students practice measure 14-15 versus 33-34 back to back. Play 14-15, play 33-34. Play 14-15, play 33-34. And this really cements in their, as I said, their physical memory as well as their brain memory, that these two things are very similar and yet they are different. And the first time I go to F flat and the second time I go to F natural, and it lasts a little bit longer. One other thing that really bothers students in this piece is that the rhythmic motion is slow or feels slow. We have a lot of 16th notes, as I was just doing the 1E and the 2E and the 3E and the 1. But then we also get these long notes like quarter notes and half notes and even a half note with a tie. So as teachers, it's very important that we remind our students not to feel self-conscious when they are allowing a note to continue sounding that feels very long to the performer. And measure 3 into 4 is like the best example of this. So 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. That feels incredibly painfully long to most students. And whether or not they think they are impatient people, they will likely shorten that note. So understanding where the big beat, the quarter note pulse is in this is in 3-4, 1, 2, 3, and being able to feel that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And then those eighth notes lead you into the next downbeat. I always tell my students, don't rob me, your audience member, of the luxurious, beautiful experience that I'm having and make me feel off kilter by getting to that downbeat too soon. I want to enjoy that long, beautiful note. If they're really struggling with this, one of the best things you can do is have them listen to the orchestrated version of this, which I will also be sure to link in the description of this video. Hearing a wind instrument play this melody makes much more sense sometimes than hearing a piano, which automatically decays as soon as you play the note. So that can be very helpful. You could even have them conduct, a simple 1, 2, 3, or you could have them count out loud or do some gentle movement of any kind of body movement version to feel all those beats so they're not tempted to shorten it. Even students who understand rhythm are tempted to shorten that. So I'm now going to give you a reductionist approach to what I think is important for our students playing Debussy. And as I may have already said, I am talking about teaching this piece to amateur students and pre-college students. I'm not talking about how to work on this with a graduate level student or a professional who's about to play this in a paid concert. I think there are 3 things that must happen for a student to sound like they're playing Debussy. First of all, they have to play what he wrote. I know that seems so simple, but sometimes actually decoding what Debussy wrote on the page is the most difficult part of this. There's a lot of instructions, there's a lot of notes, there's a lot of complicated rhythms in many of his pieces. He wrote all of his instructions in French, so we have to understand those French markings. He wrote an inordinate amount of dynamic markings, so there's just a dynamic marking on basically every single measure in this piece and in most of what he wrote. So really decoding not only the notes and the rhythms, but understanding exactly what he wrote on the page. And if you do that, it starts to come to life because Debussy was an excellent pianist. He was very particular about what he wrote. So if you do it, it works. Secondly, you have to use effective pedaling. I am not going to do a long tutorial on pedal here because I don't think that's the best thing to happen on YouTube. It's very hard to translate what I'm doing here and describing to you, partly because this is a video format, but also because my piano is different than your piano, and my room is different than your room, and that's different than what you would perform on in a hall or a recital venue or anywhere else you're going to go and perform. So what's important to remember with pedaling is that it should be sustained and legato and yet clear. That's the baseline. And then what I try to get my students at this level, late intermediate to be understanding is the pedal is not either you're 100% on or a 100% off, and that this is the only motion that we make with our feet. Instead, the pedal is a tool just like everything else, and you can go halfway, you can flutter it, you can come up part of the way to clear out part of the sound. It's much more like a dimmer switch on a light bulb than a simple on-off switch. So once again, encourage creativity in your lessons. If you are an amateur student watching this, I would strongly suggest that you would take a piece like this to a good master teacher in your area and have them work on pedaling in person. It's not the kind of thing that is easily digested from a video tutorial. If you're a teacher and the idea of this kind of, shades of pedaling is new or unfamiliar to you, then I would also encourage you to study with a master teacher locally, find someone at a university or conservatory near you, and go to take lessons and ask them to talk about pedal. See how creative you can get in your pedaling discoveries. All right, lastly, so my first two things were play what Debussy wrote, use effective pedaling, and thirdly, make beautiful sounds. I feel like Debussy was constantly experimenting with what the modern piano could do. And again, this is something that's hard to describe in a video tutorial, but we do have to think about how we use our arms, our wrists, our hands in order to make beautiful sound at the instrument. Turn your ears on, use as relaxed of a mechanism as you can, and listen for beautiful tone. If you play with a rigid technique or a fast attack on the keys, you will get a loud, harsh sound, which is not what any part of this piece is asking for. Instead, if you use a very supple hand position with flexibility in the joints and yet, firm fingertips that are supporting the hand, then you get this beautiful, gentle tone. I hope that's given you a few ideas on teaching The Lovely Girl with the Flaxen Hair by Claude Debussy. If you have questions about this piece, feel free to leave them in the comments. Please subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description, and I wish you all the best in your teaching and playing.